The story kicks off in a brutal scene, blood everywhere, bodies on the ground, and people screaming in terror. In the middle of it all, a powerful man stands tall, completely unfazed. Someone places a crown on his head, and in that moment, he declares himself the king. But before he can bask in his victory, another warrior steps up, trying to take him down. It's pointless. The new king crushes him with ease. Then, everything shifts. The king stares at a mask, lost in thought. He mumbles about his past as a king, and then, out of nowhere, he blacks out. In his unconscious state, he imagines himself sinking deep into the ocean, struggling to stay afloat. A voice echoes in his mind, telling him to seek the light in his new life. When he wakes up, things are completely different. He's no longer the feared king. Instead, he's a baby, held gently by a woman and a man who look at him with pure love. They call him Arthur. The man, his new father, tells him to call him Dad. Arthur, still confused, thinks to himself, "Who are these people?" Slowly it dawns on him he died and was reborn into a whole new world, but this time he's just a weak, helpless child. His new parents adore him, but Arthur feels trapped. He was once powerful, but now he's completely dependent on these strangers who genuinely believe he's their son. His father plays with him, his mother cares for him, but deep inside he struggles to accept this new reality. One day, Arthur watches his father train, and for the first time he realizes this world has power. Magic, even. His father is strong, and during training he accidentally injures himself. Arthur's mother immediately steps in and heals him with high-level magic. Arthur is amazed. If this world has magic, then maybe there's a way for him to regain his strength. Later, his father is seen battling monsters in the forest, easily taking them down. A group of people arrives, possibly his allies. Arthur carefully observes everything, trying to understand this new world. When his father returns home, covered in blood from the fight, he hesitates before hugging his family. Arthur realizes that carrying weapons and fighting is normal here. He decides he needs to get strong, fast. Even though he hates feeling weak, Arthur begins to appreciate his new family. There's warmth in these small, everyday moments. It's so different from his past life, where he was constantly fighting for survival. Still, he can't ignore the memories. He recalls how he used to eliminate threats in an instant and how he was always on edge. Sleeping peacefully like this feels unnatural. As time passes, Arthur begins crawling and his parents cheer him on, making sure he doesn't get hurt. One day he crawls over to a mirror and stares at himself, still struggling to accept his new identity. He can't believe this is his life now. Determined to learn more, Arthur sneaks out of bed one night and heads to the library. He doesn't want to get caught, so he moves carefully. He finally reaches the bookshelves and starts reading everything he can. He discovers that this world is divided into 3 kingdoms: the underground dwarven kingdom, the elven kingdom hidden deep in the forest, and the human kingdom of Sapin, where he lives. Unlike his old world, where power was seized, here the throne is inherited. He keeps reading, learning about mana, the source of power in this world. It turns out mana can be used in 2 ways. Enhancers use it to boost their physical strength, making them incredibly fast and strong, while summoners can control and shape mana as they wish. Arthur thinks back to his mother's healing magic and realizes that there might be exceptions to these rules, but what really matters is the core of mana itself. Most mages awaken their power around puberty, gathering mana in one place within their body, known as the mana core. Once they master it, they become true mages. Arthur remembers how he controlled energy in his past life using his inner strength and awareness. He wonders if that knowledge will help him in this world. Excited, he focuses and tries to control mana for the first time, and it works. Just as he starts to figure things out, his mother finds him and scolds him for sneaking out. But then, something in her expression changes. She looks at him, surprised, as if she's just noticed something unusual about him. Yet, instead of questioning him, she simply smiles and tells him he's doing well. Arthur was still adjusting to his new life, but certain things were hard to accept. One of the most embarrassing moments was when his mother had to change his diaper. Even though he had the mind of a grown man, his body was still just a baby's. He felt trapped, unable to do anything but wait until he grew strong enough to control himself. 2 years passed, and Arthur's mother sat by the window, writing in her diary. She adored her son, always calling him the most beautiful and intelligent child in the world. But there was one thing that always troubled her. He had never smiled. Not even once since the day he was born. No matter how much she and her husband played with him, he never laughed or showed any joy. As she gazed outside, she spotted Arthur sitting with his father. He was holding a stick, carefully mimicking the way his father moved, like he was wielding a sword. His father was impressed. He had only shown Arthur a few movements, yet the boy picked them up instantly. Excited, he called for his wife to come see, but her reaction was the opposite of what he expected. She was furious. A child who had only just learned to walk shouldn't be playing with weapons, she scolded. Arthur listened to their argument and smirked internally. It seemed like in this world mothers had all the power. One day, Arthur's parents decided to take him to the city. The moment they arrived, he was overwhelmed by everything he saw. It was unlike anything from his past life. People carried weapons openly. Strange glowing stones were being sold in shops. And, most importantly, he saw real magic for the first time. His father had told him about it, but seeing it in action was completely different. It fascinated him. He realized that this world had its own rules, its own technology, and if he wanted power, he needed to understand it all. By the time they left the city, Arthur was exhausted. He fell asleep in his mother's arms, his mind swirling with all the new information he had gathered. Even though he still felt frustrated being stuck in a child's body, he couldn't deny one thing: his parents truly cared for him. It was a strange feeling. In his previous life, he had been abandoned as a baby and left in an orphanage. No one had ever looked at him with such warmth. As he drifted off to sleep, he wondered if family was always supposed to be like this. That night, his mother sat beside him, gently running her fingers through his hair. She spoke softly, as if talking to herself, saying she knew all the little things he did. Sneaking off to read, pretending to be asleep when he wasn't. She had already figured him out. And one day, she believed he would try to leave home to explore the world on his own. The next morning, Arthur watched his father practicing magic. He was moving stones through the air with ease using his mana. Arthur studied him closely. Having a powerful mage as a father was incredibly useful. He had a living example to learn from. As Arthur watched, his mother appeared behind them. She told him that today was special. His father was going to demonstrate something much stronger than before. Arthur's curiosity grew. His father gathered energy, then unleashed an attack that sent a shockwave through the air. Arthur was stunned. His father was an enhancer, someone who used mana to strengthen their physical abilities. Seeing this power in action only fueled his desire to master mana himself. That night, Arthur was supposed to go to bed, but he had other plans. He wanted to read. His mother refused at first, but after he gave her a pitiful, innocent look, she finally gave in. She couldn't resist those eyes. Over the past 2 years, Arthur had discovered many things, but the most important was how to gather mana into a single point in his body. It was difficult, requiring intense concentration, but his efforts were finally paying off. He could feel the essence of mana forming within him. As his father rested outside, a sudden explosion rocked the house. His father acted instantly, protecting Arthur's mother from the blast. Panic filled their faces as they rushed inside, terrified that something had happened to their son. When they found him, their eyes widened in shock. Arthur was unharmed, but he was surrounded by a strange energy. He had unknowingly triggered a surge of mana. Arthur was overjoyed. He had finally done it. He had taken his first real step toward mastering mana. But before he could celebrate, the ceiling above him gave way. He braced himself for impact, thinking this might be his end. At the last moment, his parents rushed in and shielded him from the falling debris. For the first time, Arthur truly understood something. His parents would do anything to keep him safe. They had risked their lives without hesitation. His mother held him tightly, crying tears of relief. Something deep inside him stirred. In his past life, he had always been alone. No one had ever worried about him like this. Suddenly, he felt something unfamiliar on his cheeks. Tears. He was crying too. He didn't even know why, but it was the first time he had ever felt this way. He buried his face in his mother's embrace, allowing himself to feel the warmth of his new family. But the moment of peace didn't last long. A deep, guttural growl echoed from the forest. Something dangerous was nearby. We flash back to Arthur's past life, when he was known as King Grey. He's in a royal court, deciding the fate of a man who tried to kill him. Even though the crime is serious, the council decides to show mercy. They plan to send the man back to his homeland with his family, where he'll face his final punishment. The man, knowing he's doomed, begs the court not to hurt his wife and son. He admits to his crime but insists it's his fault alone. He understands that going back home means a terrible fate for them. As he kneels, he looks directly at King Grey, pleading for his family's safety. The council warns him that he shouldn't speak to the king like that, but King Grey steps in. In a shocking move, he kills the man's family right in front of him, believing he's saving them from a worse fate. The man, heartbroken, accepts this twisted mercy. Fast forward to the present, a few years later. Arthur is now training in combat with his dad, Reynolds. One day, Reynolds tries to give him a pair of gloves like his own, but Arthur refuses. He thinks using a sword is smarter since he's small and would get hurt in a fistfight. Reynolds is disappointed, but respects his choice and starts teaching him sword fighting instead. During practice, Reynolds shows Arthur how to use mana to make his sword stronger. Arthur picks it up quickly, and when he tries it, he breaks Reynolds' training stick with one hit. Reynolds is shocked. Later, he talks to Arthur's mum, Alice, saying Arthur needs a better teacher because he's clearly talented. Reynolds thought he'd be the one to train him, but it's obvious Arthur is on another level. Alice isn't so sure about letting Arthur go to someone else for training. Reynolds mentions how Arthur managed to break mana-reinforced wood at just 4 years old, which surprises Alice. They start to argue, and Arthur, watching quietly, realizes emotions can get in the way. He suggests they all go together for training. After a moment, his parents smile, impressed by his idea, and they start packing for the trip. Arthur feels happy, seeing them excited. Soon, their ride arrives. Arthur introduces himself to the group picking them up, who turn out to be the Twin Horns, a team that helped rebuild their home after a disaster. The leader, Adam, and the rest of the crew, Angela, Durden, Jasmine, and Helen, are like a dream team. As they set off, Arthur thinks about how old-fashioned this travel feels compared to the tech he knew before. But it's nice sitting next to his mum, making the journey feel cozy. They're headed to a city called Cyrus, and Arthur knows danger is always around the corner. That becomes clear when they set up camp for the night and monsters attack. Everyone jumps into action. Arthur watches closely, noticing how well the team fights together. He realizes he needs to be strong like them one day. Later, while they eat around the campfire, Arthur thinks about how traveling isn't always comfortable, but at least the food is warm. Suddenly, Alice sighs, and Arthur notices she looks full, even though he's eyeing her plate. Then he sees Reynolds has an injury. Alice starts to help him, but Helen and Jasmine sense something in the woods and get ready to protect them while she uses her healing magic. Arthur thinks about how his mum might be a special kind of mage called an emitter, known for their healing powers. Since emitters are rare, they usually keep a low profile to avoid drawing attention. This helps him understand why his parents chose to live a quiet life in the countryside. After a bit, Alice finishes healing Reynolds. Out of nowhere, Adam says he wants to get in a workout before bed and asks Reynolds if he can take Arthur for a quick training session. Arthur is surprised, but since his dad doesn't say no, he has to go along with it. As they start, Arthur sees that Adam is using a spear. He begins to worry that this might be more intense than just some light training, especially since he's only 4 years old, but he keeps his concerns to himself and decides to go with the flow. Adam asks if he's ready and starts channeling mana into his spear. Arthur realizes Adam is serious, so he follows suit, pouring mana into his own weapon and legs. This catches Adam off guard. Without wasting time, Arthur charges at him. Adam tries to block, but Arthur suddenly disappears from view and reappears behind him. He slips a bit in the dirt but manages to stay upright. Even at his young age, Arthur keeps up with Adam's moves until Adam lands a strong hit that sends him flying. Arthur feels how light his body is. Luckily, Angela uses her wind magic to gently catch him, preventing a hard fall. Alice breathes a sigh of relief, almost panicking at the thought of her little boy getting hurt. Arthur thanks Angela while the rest of the group scolds Adam for being too rough with a child. Adam tries to defend himself, saying Arthur is a little monster, but that doesn't help his case. As the group argues, Arthur, still catching his breath, is surprised when Yasmin suddenly appears next to him and asks how he did what he just did. He stays quiet, unsure of how to respond, but he can see she's determined to find out. The journey continues smoothly after that. Arthur trains not just with Adam but with everyone in the group. He learns a lot and even shares some knowledge from his past life. It's been a real eye-opener for him. He even teaches Yasmin how to use mana to improve her footwork for faster movement. Over time, he notices she's sticking close to him, which he doesn't mind at all. Then one day, Yasmin discovers it's Arthur's birthday and decides to thank him for everything he's taught her. She gives him a knife as a gift. Arthur is surprised but genuinely thankful. It's clear she's starting to care about him. While they're chatting, the other girls notice and are shocked. Yasmin isn't known for being warm with anyone. Alice, watching from a distance, teases that it's probably because her son is so charming. Adam calls out that it's time to move, and Alice passes the message to Arthur, but then he notices Alice's expression change for a moment, like something's bothering her. When he asks, she brushes it off with a smile, saying it's nothing. Still, her reaction makes him uneasy. Later, while they're traveling through the mountains, the group gets ambushed by a gang of bandits. Arrows start flying, pinning them down as enemies surround them. Fortunately, Angela steps up and uses her wind magic to deflect the arrows. Arthur realizes this is a serious situation. The bandit leader steps forward and demands they hand over the woman and the child unharmed, or else. He orders his men to attack from both sides. Despite the chaos, Alice stays calm, comforting Arthur and assuring him she'll protect him. He believes her, and that gives him strength. Durden moves to deal with the enemies coming from above using his magic, while Reynolds takes the front line, ready to fight and support the team with everything he has. Helen was firing arrows at the bandits, while Adam and Yasmin fought hard to protect the caravans. Arthur was watching everything closely. He noticed that while they were strong individually, the bandits had the advantage in numbers, and that was starting to wear them down. As the battle dragged on, exhaustion set in. Then, in a brutal move, the bandit leader threw Reynolds against one of the wagons, injuring him badly. This forced Alice and Arthur to come out of hiding. Even hurt, Reynolds told them to stay back. He knew it would be a big problem if the bandits found out how powerful Alice really was. Coughing and in pain, Reynolds looked at Arthur and urged him to take his mother and run. Arthur hesitated, feeling strong enough to fight, but Reynolds shook his head and revealed the truth. Alice was pregnant. That news hit Arthur hard. Suddenly, everything clicked. The way Alice had been acting, always holding back, now he understood why. With a new sense of purpose, Arthur agreed to his father's request. He grabbed his mother's hand and took off from the battlefield. The bandit leader noticed their escape and ordered his men to stop them. Just as they were about to attack, Reynolds charged forward and landed a huge punch. The leader blocked it with his big axe, but Reynolds wasn't holding back this time. The force of the punch made the bandits stagger back. Meanwhile, some bandits tried to cut off Arthur and Alice's escape, but Yasmin and Adam quickly took them out. They tossed weapons to Arthur, urging him to keep running and not look back. The rest of the group joined in, doing everything they could to clear a path for mother and son. As Arthur ran, his heart racing, he couldn't help but think about how he had taken so much from others in his past life. Now, he was running to protect what little he had left. He remembered the family he had destroyed. Maybe this was karma coming back around. Just when he thought they were safe, a hidden enemy struck. A wind mage appeared out of nowhere and cast a powerful spell. Arthur reacted quickly, pushing his mother out of the way, but the spell hit him hard, sending him flying off a cliff. As he fell, everything slowed down. He didn't want to die alone, so he grabbed the dagger at his belt and threw it upward, managing to catch the wind mage by the leg, pulling the attacker down with him. Back on the battlefield, Angela and Durden were casting spells, trying to catch Arthur as he fell, as the wind whipped around him. Arthur felt something strange in his chest. Not fear or pain, but something warm. He realized he understood what that man had meant when he sacrificed himself for his loved ones. He thought about the family he had destroyed, the home he had burned, and how the parents had only cared that their child was safe. That man had given everything to protect those he loved. Tears filled Arthur's eyes as joy and sorrow mixed inside him. He remembered his father's words and the fact that he was going to be a big brother, something he never thought he'd experience. The thought made the tears flow even more. As the ground rushed up to meet him, everything faded to black. In the next moment, Arthur found himself alive. He woke up in a strange forest somewhere he didn't recognize. The first thing he saw was a huge, intimidating beast standing over him. The creature looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Good morning, Arthur," greeting him by name. Arthur was stunned. That was the last thing he expected to hear. Two shadowy figures briefly appear, engaged in a quiet conversation. One of them shares that they've discovered something incredibly beautiful, so rare they might never witness it again. The other figure, sensing danger, wonders aloud whether something terrible is about to happen. The first confirms it will, unless something changes. Elsewhere, Arthur stares at a mysterious creature. Confused and alarmed, he finds himself asking internally what the creature is, and more importantly, why it's here. But the biggest question gnawing at him is whether it's a friend or a threat. Suddenly, the creature twitches. Arthur reacts instantly, launching himself forward to attack. But before he can make contact, the creature casually flicks a finger, swatting him away and sending him flying like a rag doll. Landing hard, Arthur hears the creature speak in a calm, firm tone. It addresses him by name and tells him that he still has a lot to learn. It adds that it isn't his enemy, implying that Arthur may want to ease up on the hostility. The creature then walks over to an odd wall covered in fruit-bearing roots. Plucking a few fruits, it tells Arthur that he must be hungry. Even if he isn't, the creature insists he needs nourishment to regain strength and recover. Arthur attempts to speak, but his pain gets the better of him. The creature remarks that he's lucky to be alive and says that answers will only come after he eats. Accepting the condition, Arthur devours the fruit. Once he finishes, his first concern spills out. He desperately wants to know if his parents are safe. The creature calmly reassures him that they're alive and had continued their journey days ago. To prove it, it conjures a magical image showing the site where they were ambushed. The vision overwhelms Arthur with emotion. Tears stream down his face, relief and joy crashing into him all at once. With the heavy burden finally lifted, he attempts to thank the creature, only to realize he doesn't know her name. She smiles and introduces herself as Sylvia. Over the next few days, Arthur recovers under Sylvia's care. He expresses a strong desire to return home, but Sylvia explains that they're near the edge of a forest swarming with bandits and wild beasts. She assures him that she knows a safe path, but notes that creating a spatial portal requires careful preparation. Understanding the situation, Arthur begins to train right away. Sylvia appreciates his drive and remarks that children should stay active, yet Arthur can't help but notice how guarded Sylvia is. She never talks about herself. Her monstrous appearance has even startled him more than once, like a living jump scare. Still, beneath the surface, he senses an unmistakable warmth and kindness. One day, as Arthur meditates, Sylvia observes something intriguing. She realizes that he already possesses a mana core, despite his young age. Curious, she asks him to try something. Then, right before his eyes, she creates a spell in one hand while simultaneously gathering mana. Arthur is stunned. She's drawing energy and casting at the same time, something he didn't even think was possible. Sylvia explains that humans often treat mana as something rigid, only storing and using it. But for mana beasts like her, such techniques are second nature. She then asks Arthur if he wants to learn this ability. Without hesitation, Arthur agrees. But before she teaches him, Sylvia asks a serious question. What does he plan to do with that power? She makes it clear that she refuses to pass on strength to someone who might misuse it. Arthur thinks for a moment, then recalls the recent ambush. He declares that he'll use his power to kill anyone who tries to take away what matters to him. Sylvia doesn't accept that answer. With a flick of her finger, she strikes him again and scolds him. That wasn't what she was hoping to hear. Arthur pushes back, arguing that fighting and killing enemies is necessary. That mindset made him the strongest king in his past life. But Sylvia isn't convinced. She urges him not to throw away the life she saved on hate and revenge. With surprising tenderness, she strokes his face with a clawed hand and tells him that she could easily end his life if she wanted to, but she'd rather pat his head instead. Arthur blushes, flustered, and admits he'd prefer that too. Sylvia smiles, calling it the better choice. She tells him that anger and hatred are easy to ignite, but they leave nothing behind. She wants a better path for him. Then she asks once more, what will he do with his power? This time, Arthur reflects deeply. He remembers peaceful moments with his parents and the adventures he shared with the Twin Horns party. With newfound clarity, he answers that he wants to use his strength to protect the people he loves. Sylvia finally hears the answer she was waiting for. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, another creature much like Sylvia roams silently. It senses her presence and knows that she cannot hide. Rising into the air, it continues its search, but its true intent remains a mystery. The scene shifts again, this time to Arthur's past life. Back then, he was known as King Grey. One day, he left his chambers to visit an influential noble within the castle. Although he held the title of king, real power resided with the parliament. With dwindling resources and declining birth rates, kings had been reduced to weapons of war. During the visit, the noble flattered him, praising his conquests and celebrating the wealth and glory his brutal victories had brought. Then, with a curious tone, the noble asked what brought the great King Grey to his home. Grey said nothing. Without a word, he turned around and walked away. After that, we see a shattered display case. A crown lies broken on the ground, and next to it, a sword is stabbed into the floor. Back in the present, Sylvia is teaching Arthur how to use magic by gathering mana. He needs to collect it while using it, and once he can do that, his magical abilities will expand significantly. Arthur struggles to stay focused, but he keeps repeating to himself that he can't rush, he has to stay in control. We flash back to his past during a training match. There was so much he didn't have back then. What he wanted most was to control mana, to win, to improve. That experience fuels him, and he finally succeeds in activating the skill. He's thrilled. Sylvia congratulates him, but when he walks toward her, she suddenly punches him into a pile of rocks. He's completely confused, even more so when he realizes he's wrapped in some kind of magic barrier. Sylvia tells him to stay quiet, so Arthur just peeks through a hole between the rocks to see what's happening. That's when a mysterious figure suddenly appears, the one who had been searching for her. Arthur wonders who he is. Even though he looks like Sylvia, he gives off a completely different, threatening vibe. Sylvia says she's surprised he found her, and the man responds that the pain in her blood led him there. He cuts straight to the point. He wants her to come with him. Sylvia refuses without hesitation. The man sighs and says he didn't want to use violence, but he's okay with it. He quickly charges up a powerful dark energy attack and fires it at her. Though Sylvia blocks the attack, the force overwhelms her. She collapses. Weak and unable to hold her ground. In her injured state, she sends a telepathic message to Arthur, telling him not to worry. Arthur quietly keeps watching. The man warns Sylvia that if she pushes herself, she'll only shorten the little time she has left to live. But Sylvia snaps back that the same goes for him. Suddenly, her entire body starts to transform. In just a few seconds, she reveals her true form. A magnificent white dragon. The moment she takes that form, she unleashes a devastating energy breath, which the man struggles to block. He warns her that using such power will cost her, but Sylvia says it doesn't matter. She's already been happy, though she admits she wished it could have lasted longer. The man manages to deflect her breath attack, but the force causes the cave to begin collapsing. Acting quickly, he casts a spell to stop the cave-in. It's a magical blast that explodes in all directions. Sylvia shields herself with her wings, but since the attack covers such a wide area, she quickly checks to make sure Arthur is still hidden and safe behind the rocks. When she sees he's unharmed, she feels a huge wave of relief. But that split-second distraction gives the enemy a chance to charge another wave of dark energy. Sylvia clearly doesn't like what she's seeing. The man throws the energy sphere at her, and in response, Sylvia activates a time-freezing ability. Arthur isn't affected by the spell, so Sylvia calls him over. Arthur walks up and asks what's going on. Sylvia explains that she used her power, but more importantly, she wants to know what he thinks of her new form. Arthur guesses she's a dragon, and she confirms it, though that's just what humans call them. Putting that aside, she tells him they need to move quickly. She opens a portal and apologizes for not being able to bring him closer to safety. Still, she reassures him that he'll be okay. He's learned enough to survive. Before saying goodbye, she asks what he plans to use his powers for. Arthur answers with some pain in his voice that he wants to protect the people he loves. Sylvia accepts that as a promise. Arthur then notices her injury and starts to worry. To shift his focus, Sylvia tells him she has something for him. A strange-looking egg and a feather. She instructs him to wrap the egg in the feather and protect it with his life. Then she gently presses her nose against him, which causes 2 glowing marks to appear on his arms. Arthur asks what they are, but Sylvia, weakening, just says he'll find out in time. It's time to say goodbye. But before he leaves, Sylvia confesses she could have sent him home earlier. She just didn't want to. She enjoyed living in this world with him too much. Feeling sad, Arthur asks if he can use his powers to protect her now. Despite everything she taught him and the promise they made, Sylvia explains that this outcome was always going to happen. Their promise doesn't apply here. Arthur is surprised by how calm his next words sound. He wonders if it's his gratitude or the time they spent together that changed him. He tells her that he doesn't care if she's a dragon or a monster, she's family to him. Sylvia reminds him that he already has a mother, so Arthur decides to call her Grandma instead. She's taken aback, but after a moment, asks him to say it again. He does, with a big smile. Sylvia can't help but smile back and thank him, but with time running out, she pushes him into the portal. Arthur holds on to the egg and feather, stepping into the portal, but just before it closes, he turns around and says he doesn't want to leave. He wants her to come with him. The portal shuts just as he says it, and he's forced to leave her behind. Once Arthur is gone, Sylvia lets the time-freezing magic end. Since she hasn't moved from her spot, the dark energy attack hits her directly, knocking her to the ground. Despite her condition, the enemy doubts that the attack was enough to kill her. That's when Sylvia proves him right. She launches a surprise counterattack at close range. The blast is massive, shaking the forest. We then cut to two mysterious individuals talking. One of them says she's done enough and agrees to handle the rest. Everything now rests in her hands. As Arthur travels through the portal, he speaks with Celia one last time. He tells her he's sad. Sylvia reminds him that this world is full of pain, but that's exactly why they must turn pain into happiness. And it's okay if he can't do that yet. Step by step, he'll get there, because he's the strongest king of all. Finally, she tells him not to let hate and rage fill his heart and to let the light guide his new life. She calls him King Grey, revealing that she knew about his past life. Arthur is shocked. Could she be the one who brought him to this world? He wakes up alone in a forest. As he hears a noise from the bushes, tears are still streaming down his face. Arthur was wandering through the forest, still sniffling from crying, when he heard a noise from the bushes. He turned to look, and as he moved deeper into the woods, another scream echoed through the trees. There were people nearby. Without thinking, Arthur climbed up into the branches, careful not to drop the strange egg he was holding. Soon he spotted what was happening. A young elf girl was being taken by a group of mercenaries. They were laughing, talking about how much money they could get for her, and it hit Arthur hard. It reminded him of a time when he and his mum were almost caught by bad guys with the same plan. Anger bubbled up inside him, but he remembered what Sylvia taught him about staying calm. Instead of rushing in, he decided to follow them quietly. As night fell, the mercenaries set up camp. Arthur thought about asking them for directions to the nearest town, but he was more worried about the girl. So, he crouched down and focused his energy, preparing for what he needed to do. When it got dark, he noticed the wolves in the camp were acting strangely calm. He figured it was magic, which gave him an idea. He threw something to scare the wolves, causing chaos. The mercenaries rushed out to calm them down, thinking it might attract monsters. That's when Arthur made his move. He snuck up on one mercenary who had wandered away and took him out with a charged blade. Then he grabbed the guy's knife and used it on another mercenary who came to check on the noise. With two down, Arthur felt tired. This was harder than he thought. More mercenaries showed up, wondering what was going on. Arthur didn't hesitate. He lunged and managed to injure one in the leg. The guy screamed and the leader came out, excited to see Arthur. To him, a kid with magic was worth way more than the elf girl, so he ordered his men not to hurt him. The boss started casting a spell, and Arthur watched closely, unsure of what was coming. Suddenly the guy attacked. Arthur dodged just in time and tried to kick him, but the boss sidestepped easily. He acknowledged Arthur's skills, which only fueled Arthur's determination. Switching tactics, Arthur threw his knife, tied with a string. The boss caught it like it was nothing and charged at Arthur with lightning speed, landing a brutal kick that sent Arthur crashing to the ground. The boss picked him up by the legs, inspecting his prize, but Arthur channeled fire magic into his leg and blasted it into the mercenary's hand. The guy screamed and dropped him. Furious, the merc muttered about selling Arthur's corpse to collectors. While he was distracted, Arthur threw his knife one last time, hitting the guy right in the forehead. With the leader down, the last wounded mercenary begged for mercy. Arthur couldn't do it. The elf girl had pleaded for mercy too, and they ignored her. After finishing him off, Arthur climbed into the wagon and gently took off the elf girl's blindfold. For a moment, he saw a strange shadow over her face, but he brushed it off and told her she was safe now. She noticed his hurt arm and looked worried. Arthur understood. It was the kind of thing normal kids would freak out about, and this was the first time he'd been with someone his age in a long time. He covered the bodies, saying no child should see something like this, but the girl pointed out that he was a child too, so his logic didn't make sense. When she asked what happened to the bad men, Arthur simply said they had an accident, but she smiled, relieved. He grabbed some gear from the mercenaries, said goodbye, and got ready to leave. He had his own journey to continue. Just as he was about to walk away, she tugged on his sleeve. He realized she didn't want to be left alone. He gently explained he needed to find his family and had important things to do, but she wouldn't let go. Curious, he asked if elf kids were safe in the forest. She shook her head, saying her parents warned her about tree monsters that eat kids. She had gotten lost chasing bugs and didn't know how far she had wandered. Worse, her village was in the opposite direction from where Arthur was headed. He sighed, knowing he couldn't just leave her now. He agreed to help her, then looked at the wolves. He thought about ending their lives to keep them safe, but then she surprised him with a suggestion. She asked him to let the wolves go, which worried him. What if they got attacked? But she reassured him, saying not to worry. The creatures were usually only around bad people, and the folks in the forest respected all living things. Tesia's words made Arthur think twice. When he finally let the wolves go, they disappeared into the trees without making a sound. A wave of relief washed over him. With nothing holding them back, Tesia asked Arthur to walk with her so she could show him the way home. They strolled through the forest, and as the sun began to rise, Arthur realized he still didn't know her name. She introduced herself as Tesia Elita, and he shared his name too. While they cooked a small meal, Arthur encouraged her to eat, even if she wasn't feeling hungry. He remembered how Sylvia used to make him eat, and he chuckled at how much he sounded like her. Tesia wrinkled her nose at the food, saying it smelled weird. Arthur explained it was just dried meat, boiled with a bit of salt, though he admitted it could use some herbs. She made a funny face while eating, but soon mentioned she was craving something sweet. Watching her, Arthur thought about how he always saw food as just something to keep him going. Maybe he could learn a thing or two about enjoying life from Tesia. Then she asked what brought him to the Shirewood. Arthur told her he got separated from his family, and that struck a chord with Tesia. She realized they were both in a similar situation, even if she wouldn't be going with him when he headed back. Curious, Arthur asked about life in her elfland. As they walked, Tesia described Eleanor as a fun place. Her parents were always busy, so she spent a lot of time with her grandpa and some caretakers. After a while, Arthur noticed they were taking longer than expected, and there was still no sign of the elven village. He looked at Tesia and saw some glowing bugs dancing around her. When he asked about them, she said they were common in Eleanor and used to mark paths. She caught one on her finger and offered it to him, but when he declined, she playfully put it on his ear, saying it looked cool, like an earring. The little bug flew away, and Arthur figured this was just how kids had fun. Tesia then mentioned she was excited to train with her teacher once her magic woke up. Arthur found that interesting. Apparently, elves didn't have formal schools, but he kept that to himself to avoid confusing her. Suddenly, they noticed one of the wolves from earlier was following them. Arthur decided to ignore it for now and kept walking. When night fell, they set up camp. But then Arthur heard the howl of the horned wolf from before and regretted not taking it out. He told Tesia to stay inside the tent while he kept watch outside. Alone, he thought about everything that had happened that day and wondered what Sylvia had wanted to give him. Later, Tesia came out and asked if he was really going to stay awake. She mentioned her grandpa told her not to sleep near men, but promised she wouldn't tell anyone. Arthur assured her he wasn't tired, but she insisted that if any kids were wandering around, they could get into trouble. He teased her about being scared of ghosts, but she clarified that she was just worried about their safety and suggested he keep watch from inside the tent instead. Eventually, he gave in. Once inside, she told him she wasn't scared or anything, but insisted he shouldn't leave without telling her and that he better not fall asleep first. That was super important to her. Before drifting off, she asked if he was from the human kingdom. She had heard that human men were gross and had lots of wives. Arthur was confused and joked that there must be elf guys like that too, but it turned out Tesia didn't even know what gross really meant. As he tried to explain, he noticed she was already fast asleep. Watching her, he thought this must be what it felt like to have a little sister. The next morning, they set off again. Arthur noticed Tesia seemed so relaxed with him that she almost forgot about the slavers. That worried him. Her family was still out there, and he didn't want to waste time getting her back to them. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp pain shot through Arthur's mana core. Tecia quickly asked if he was okay. He said he was fine, but she decided to look for herbs that might help. That could be risky, but Arthur's warning doesn't reach Tecia, so she doesn't hear him. Time passes, and the pain in his mana core doesn't let up. It just keeps coming back more often. He thinks about telling Tecia, but quickly decides against it. He doesn't want to make her anxious. Suddenly, the horned wolf from before shows up again, and Arthur doesn't see that as a good sign. Just then, Tecia comes back, excited because she found something she thinks will help with his stomach pain, completely unaware of the real problem. Arthur quickly tells her to stay back, worried the wolf might attack, but instead of being aggressive, the wolf calmly drops a dead animal on the ground and walks away. Tecia thinks it's a thank you for setting it free. Arthur is stunned. He can't wrap his head around how animals think like that. Later that night, they cook and eat the animal the wolf left. Arthur is surprised at how tasty it is, like something from a fancy place. Tecia mentions she couldn't find any healing herbs, but she did find some mushrooms. Apparently, women in Eleanor eat them all the time because they're super healthy. Arthur tries one, but it just gives him awful gas, something Tecia clearly didn't expect. That night, once they're inside the tent, Tecia starts sharing bedtime stories she used to hear. But after a few minutes, Arthur can't help but drift off to sleep. The next morning, they hit the road again. Arthur has to push through the pain in his mana core. While they walk, Tecia says since they know each other better now, she wants to call him Ark, like they're real friends. He agrees, but doesn't say much else. She asks if that's all he has to say, and Arthur responds in a mock-serious tone that for a low-born village boy like him, it's an honor to walk beside Lady Tecia Erelid. She doesn't get the joke and thinks it's a weird old man thing to say. Arthur teases her back, calling her a crybaby for not wanting to go to the bathroom alone. Tecia gets a bit offended and tells him to be quiet. Since she was trying to be nice and make friends, Arthur figures her mood must be better if she's joking around like this. Soon after, they find what they were looking for, a glowing light shining from a tree. Arthur feels uneasy, unsure of what it is. A gentle wind blows from it, pushing him back a little. Tecia steps closer and then turns to him, inviting him to join her. She says, "This is the entrance to the land of the elves." Arthur and Tecia stepped out of a glowing portal and ended up in a hidden forest city, tucked away behind towering trees and shining lights. The place looked magical, old, but beautiful, like something out of a dream. Tecia landed with ease, calm and confident, while Arthur tripped and hit the ground hard. Before he could even sit up, a group of elf guards showed up, clearly spooked by their sudden arrival. They didn't waste time. They grabbed Arthur roughly, treating him like a threat. He freaked out, unsure of what was going on, and looked to Tecia for help, but she just stood there, watching. No reaction, no help. That hit him hard. All this time he thought they were close, friends, maybe even more than that, but now doubt crept in. Maybe she had just used him, and he had been foolish to trust her so easily. Things got tense fast. One of the guards even suggested they should just deal with Arthur permanently. Just when it seemed like it was over for him, Tecia finally stepped in. She told them Arthur had saved her life. The lead guard didn't look convinced and hinted that Arthur had somehow tricked her. Then, out of nowhere, an old elf stepped in, full of presence and power. Everyone went quiet. He told the guards to back off. Tecia ran to the elder, showing him a level of respect that surprised Arthur. It turned out he was her grandfather and a former ruler of the city. He thanked Arthur for protecting his granddaughter and dropped a bombshell. Tecia was actually part of the royal family. Arthur was stunned. She had never said a word about being royalty. Soon after, her parents showed up in a fancy ride, clearly anxious. Her mum seemed happy to see her, but her dad was furious when he saw Arthur. He wanted him taken away immediately, but again, the elder stepped in and explained everything. Tecia backed him up, saying Arthur deserved kindness, not punishment. Her dad hesitated. Letting a human into their sacred home wasn't part of their rules. But Tecia didn't care. She just wanted to have a meal with the one person who had stood by her. Her grandfather said he wanted to talk to Arthur later, and Arthur could sense the man had some serious power behind those calm eyes. As they walked toward the castle, Tecia held Arthur's hand, guiding him through the city. They passed homes built into the trees, rope bridges hanging between branches, and market stalls packed with glowing goods. It was incredible. But Arthur couldn't relax. People stared. Some looked surprised, others clearly upset. He could feel the tension in the air. It was like everyone was waiting for him to mess up. What he'd read about elves and how peaceful they were didn't match what he was seeing. He glanced at Tesha again. She had saved him, yes, but the way she'd watched him earlier, like a stranger, still bothered him. There was something hidden in her, something he didn't fully understand. His body ached, but the real pain came from the trust he'd started to lose. When they finally got to the castle, the staff welcomed Tesha warmly. She told them to treat Arthur well because he had risked his life for her. Even if he wasn't one of them, she believed he could be trusted. Arthur had a lot on his mind and wanted to talk things through, so Tesha took him to a proper dinner with her family. When they got there, the table was already full of elegant dishes and shining silverware, way fancier than anything he'd ever seen. He paused, feeling awkward, like he didn't belong. But Tesha gave him a small nod, and that helped him sit down. Even then, sitting there surrounded by elves in fancy clothes and serious faces, Arthur felt like all eyes were on him. Tesha's dad introduced himself as Alwyn, the king, and her mum as Queen Muriel. Arthur kept it simple when talking about himself, just a regular guy from a small place, definitely not someone used to royal dinners. Surprisingly, Alwyn didn't brush him off. He actually complimented how Arthur spoke, which gave Arthur a bit of confidence. But things turned serious quickly. The conversation shifted to what happened in the woods. Arthur kept it short and didn't go into the painful stuff. He just said he'd gotten separated during a raid and had been on his own since. When he talked about helping Tesha escape danger, the atmosphere in the room changed. Alwyn's anger flared up at the thought of someone trying to harm his daughter. He launched into a rant about how dangerous humans were. Arthur kept his cool and explained that every race had its good and bad people. Then came the part that really got everyone's attention, how Arthur had fought back against the attackers. He admitted he used a little magic. That surprised them. One of the guards didn't believe it and said Arthur was probably lying to win favor, but Tesha's grandfather Vian shut that down fast and reminded them to stay respectful. Tesha jumped in and backed Arthur up, telling everyone exactly what happened, how she'd been scared, trapped, and how Arthur had stepped in. Her mother hugged her tightly, clearly shaken. That seemed to calm Alwyn a little. He thanked Arthur, though it was clear he still didn't fully trust him. Arthur didn't want rewards or special treatment. All he really cared about was going home. He missed his family and just wanted to know if they were safe. But with all the tension between elves and humans, getting help wasn't going to be easy. Arthur made a quiet point. If elves thought they were so wise and noble, maybe they should show it through how they treat others. That seemed to hit home. Vian gave a small smile, clearly impressed. But then came the bad news. The portal that could take Arthur home didn't work all the time. It only opened during a rare event that happened once every 7 years. And the next one was still 5 years away. There was no way Alwyn was letting a human stay in their city that long. So he decided Arthur would leave the next morning, escorted by some guards. Arthur felt relieved, even though a strange pain was growing in his chest again. He didn't show it, but it was starting to wear him down. That night, Arthur was given a nice room to rest in. As he cleaned up, the pain in his chest got worse. Tired and alone, he walked out onto the balcony and stared at the sky. The cool breeze helped a bit, but the ache inside wasn't just from his injuries. It was from everything. The fear, the homesickness, the not knowing if his family was okay. Inside, he heard laughter from Tesha and her parents. That only made it harder. He wondered if his own family was smiling somewhere, or if they were even alive. The thought stayed with him long after the stars faded, keeping him awake deep into the night. That night, sleep just wouldn't come for Arthur. His chest hurt more than ever, and no matter how many times he rolled over or tried to calm his mind, it didn't help. So, he slipped out of the guest room quietly, hoping a walk under the night sky might clear his thoughts. The city was peaceful in the dark, with soft lights glowing from the treetops and bridges swaying gently in the wind. Arthur wandered through the empty paths, trying not to think too much, but the more he walked, the heavier his heart felt. Eventually, Tesha caught up with him. She must have been looking for him. She could tell something was bothering him just by his posture. Arthur tried to play it off like everything was fine, but it didn't fool her. She seemed to regret how things had gone at dinner, especially how her family had treated him. Arthur didn't hold a grudge. He got it. He was a stranger, a human in a place that didn't trust outsiders. If anything, their reaction just proved how much they cared about Tesha's safety. He tried to lighten the mood, but she wasn't smiling. Tesha mentioned that everything would get better once Arthur found his family. That quiet comment hit him hard. He'd been carrying guilt ever since he got separated from them. A small part of him kept whispering that it was all his fault, that maybe they wouldn't even want him back. He didn't say it out loud, but the doubt was heavy. Tesha didn't let that slide. Her words made it clear, if she cared this much about him leaving, then surely his family would too, maybe even more. That little bit of comfort eased something in him. Then something magical happened. Tiny glowing lights drifted through the air, like soft embers floating on a breeze. They weren't fireflies, but something else. Smaller, slower, almost dreamlike. Arthur stared at them in silence, caught between the beauty of the moment and the weight in his chest. That's when something small zipped toward him. He caught it instinctively, realizing it wasn't one of the glowing lights. It was a small, smooth stone. It was a test. Out of the shadows came Vian, Tesha's grandfather. He'd been watching, curious. The toss wasn't meant to hurt Arthur. He just wanted to see how fast the boy really was. Arthur wasn't thrilled, but Tesha was even less happy. She didn't like her grandfather testing people like that. Vian shrugged it off, and without warning created a wooden training blade out of thin air and tossed it to Arthur. Arthur knew what was happening. This was a challenge. He stepped back, ready, while Tesha moved out of the way. Arthur charged forward, hoping to surprise Vian, but the old elf moved like lightning. Every swing Arthur made missed, every trick failed. He had to tap into his magic just to keep up. Vian didn't break a sweat. His calm was unnerving. Even when Arthur got clever, Vian was always a step ahead. Then, with a single powerful move, Vian shattered Arthur's sword. A sharp piece flew toward Tesha, but Arthur reacted quickly, tossing the broken handle to knock it away. He didn't hesitate. The fight wasn't over. Arthur, drained but determined, pushed deeper. More swings, more effort. This time, he landed a blow, just one, but it was enough to make Vian pause, just for a second. Tesha rushed in after that, not impressed with the lesson. She scolded Vian for going too far. The old elf chuckled, half serious, admitting he might have lost if he'd held back. For Arthur, something clicked. He was finally being seen, not as a lost kid, but someone who could actually hold his own. Then came a surprise. Vian offered to train him properly. Arthur was stunned. A part of him wanted to say yes on the spot, but the thought of his family held him back. That's when Vian made a promise. He would make sure Arthur's parents heard from him, that they'd know he was alive and safe. Arthur's face lit up, but just then the pain in his chest surged again, stronger than before. It wiped the smile right off his face. Vian turned serious. The pain wasn't random. There was something inside Arthur, something powerful and unstable. It was more than just magic. It was a force that would keep growing whether Arthur liked it or not. That's why this training wasn't optional anymore. If Arthur didn't learn how to control it, it would destroy him.